is Long Way to the Top, and I'm your host, Shane Bryan. Next year marks the milestone for my next guest. 60 years in the Oz music scene, both in front of the mic and behind. Safe to say that he has written or produced hits in pretty much every decade. Starting off with his own smash hits with Daddy Cool, producing records for Skyhooks, Jojo Zepp and the Falcons. He had massive success in the 80s with Mondo Rock, and of course his solo career. There's no other name that could be behind all of this. 26 ARIA top 40 hits to his credit as singer, songwriter and producer. Ross Wilson, one of the most awarded, respected and well-known artists in Australia. Ross, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, there's just so much that you've done. I mean, it's almost like a case of where do we start? Your career is just so illustrious.
Well, I got to say, you know, when you're young and all that, you're bouncing around the world, and you seem to fit a lot more in. I look back and I can't. It's hard to believe that, you know, between Daddy Cool and then Mondo Rock and producing, like you said, Skyhooks, that all took place in like a 20-year period. And I go, how did I fit all that in? I don't know, because now I've definitely kind of leveled out, you know, and I'm spending all my time on my own music. I used to be a bit of a, you know, talent chaser, and when I first heard Skyhooks in their early days, I went, wow, those songs, we've got to get them out there, and that was my main kind of thing. And the same with Jojo Zepp and the Falcons. The primary songwriter in the beginning wasn't Joe Camilleri, it was Wayne Burt. And I was his publisher, and I was like, we've got to get these songs out there. And that was my prime thing. Even with my own music, I was like, I got this music, I got to get it out there, you know. Yeah. So that was the motivating factor in all of those things. And now I'm just enjoying myself touring around and letting things happen. I've got a very good team looking after me, management, and we go around and I've sort of settled down, and I just kind of think, well, what is my purpose in life, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it's to sort of bring a little joy into the world, not just to the people I play to, but to myself as well. And I just love playing live, and I've got a great band, and that's my primary thought these days, you know. But I'm still writing songs, and you'll hear some of those in the future.
And, of course, I didn't even get to mention the fact that you performed with the Wiggles. That must have been the highlight of your career.
Well, it was. It was a wonderful little step, because I was married when I was quite young and had a son, Daniel, and he's grown up now. He's like 53, right?
Yeah.
And his mother, Pat Wilson, was the bop girl, but then we sort of grew apart, and we started living separate lives. And then after about another 8 years or so of bachelorhood, I got married again to my wife, Tanya, and we started having babies. It was like a late juncture. I think I was about 50 years old or something.
Yes.
And sort of they're all grown up now, but when you've got little kids, one of the greatest babysitting machines of all time is the Wiggles.
Yeah, isn't it? Yeah.
And back then it was VHS, you know, stick in the VHS, and then suddenly DVDs came along as well. And so you'd sit them in front of it, and you could go up and be pretty happy and do stuff while they're all doing the hot potato and the rest of it.
Yeah.
So they were watching a video one day, and it had all these guest stars. It's like Tim Finn, you know, it's like one of my contemporaries, and Slim Dusty. I love Slim Dusty. And they're all in this one video. And I went, gee, it was early days of the internet too, but I got on there and I sent an email. If you ever do it in one of those guest star videos again, I wouldn't mind being in it. I got these little kids and da-da-da. Yeah. And I immediately got an answer. Oh, well, we are doing a new one, Ross, and we've got this. They work very fast. We've got this great idea. You'll be King Mondo from the planet Rock. and the Wiggles will come to your planet, and we'll sing Eagle Rock and all this. And so I became King Mondo, and it was fantastic because it was animated, right? The very first one was my appearance as King Mondo. So it was a lot, sort of like being in the Simpsons, you know, where they have, you know, a cartoon version of real people, and then they had an add-on thing. They came around to our house, and they were interviewing their kids, you know, and the eldest child, Olympia, she was interviewing the other two kids. And so there's just a whole kind of Wiggles universe expanded around me. And then eventually I became King Mondo had made a return appearance.
Yes.
In the flesh.
In the flesh, yes.
With singing a Christmas song that we'd written. And anyway, I've appeared a few times as King Mondo.
Oh, what a great cartoon character you are.
It was fantastic. Well, one of the things about being the cartoon character, you got to do the voices, right?
Yes.
So they actually did the voices of the script before the animator had done all that. And they were taking photos of me so they could get me looking like who I am. So we're standing around a microphone and they're going, King Mondo, we're writing the script, here we are, we've landed on your planet and blah, 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 blah. And I'm saying my stuff. We've got this great idea, King Mondo. When we say something, you answer us, but you sing it, right? I went, okay. So there's this line, and they're going, we got to go back to Earth now, King Mondo. And I go, been a long time since I've been to Earth, and then they go, how do we get there? And I go, see that little blue blob up there? If you head for that, you'll be heading in the right direction. And then so the consequence of that was, because they were huge in America, that from then for the next 10 years or so, and probably still are. And I started getting emails from mothers in America, like, my son Errol thinks he's King Mondo, and every time I ask him to clean his room, he sings to me, or ask a question, he'll sing me the answer. Like, I got a few of these things. I go, yes, I'm an influencer.
That's funny. That is funny. I mean, obviously, Eagle Rock was a big thing for them. It was a big thing for you. Let's go back to the 70s. Let's go back to 1971. Eagle Rock.
Yeah.
Firstly, I guess, where did that come from? And did you know it was going to be such a massive?
I can tell you where it came from. I had a band called The Party Machine.
Yeah.
That had Ross Hannaford, who was also in Daddy Cool later, Mike Rudd on bass, who became the leader of Spectrum, and a guy called Peter Curtin on the drums, who went off and played with other people and then became an airline pilot in America. I mean, life's funny.
Yeah.
And then we had gone professional, but we ended up getting ripped off blind. We went on these tours and it was terrible. We got ripped off, and then the final indignity was all of our equipment was stolen,
Yeah.
While we were in Newcastle. So I had to come back to Melbourne. We're going, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I received a phone call from Brian Peacock, who was playing bass in a band that was half English, half sort of Australasian, Procession. And they'd had a hit with a cappella kind of progressive rock thing. They had a hit with a song called Anthem. They'd gone to England. They had good management, but the band was, some money had left, and they had this idea that, even though we've got a great singer, Mick Rogers, the lead guitarist, maybe we should have a front guy, a front man. And they'd liked what they'd seen with The Party Machine, the songs that I'd been writing, and my presence on stage. Would you like to come and sing with us in England? Right. Because of all the disasters that had recently befallen us, and Ross Hannaford was the art student, he wanted to get back to art school and all that. I said, I've had this call, I'm going to go over there. And they went, yeah, good on you, that sounds like a good idea. I went off to England. While we were there, and we're playing all places like the Marquee Club and having had a great time.
Yep.
Really fantastic time. It was summertime, 1969, in the middle of the year over there, And I bought myself a guitar and I'm mucking around, and I came up with the on the guitar. And it's one of those stories, like I've heard the same thing. Paul McCartney wakes up in the morning, he's got yesterday's melody in his head. He's going, that's fantastic. Maybe I ripped it off from someone. He goes and asks if they'd heard it before. And I know that sounds like an original. And same with Keith Richards, going, dun, da, 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 wakes up and sticks it down. Oh, that sounds too good. Maybe I ripped it off. I'm the same thing. Gee, maybe I stole that from someone. I'm starting to play it to people and they go, no, I've never heard that before. I go, it must be mine. But then it wasn't until I got back to Australia after months and months later, after the band over there broke up, and I had to come back to Australia, and it took a long time because we trekked it, me and my wife, new wife, bride, Pat, and had this amazing odyssey across the world, going to all places that you can't go to anymore, like Iran and Syria and Iraq, and you name it, we were there.
Yeah,
and it taught me a lot about the world. So we get back to Australia. I'm back in my old childhood room at my parents' place while we're getting our crap together. And I went, this song needs something else, because I had access to guitar again. And I've been thinking about the song, and I come up with got to have a chorus. Hey, this old eagle rock. And I'd already decided it was called Eagle Rock because while I was in London, I'd seen this picture in a magazine about blues music, and there's people dancing. It said they were dancing in a juke joint, and they were doing cutting the pigeon wing and doing the Eagle Rock. Yeah, I said, this song's a bit anachronistic, and I was trying to play like a Mississippi blues guy. That's how I come up with the riff.
Yeah.
And so that's where the song title came from. So we're going to do the Eagle Rock. So that's how it all slammed together, slammed the chorus on that. Was going around seeing all my old buddies like Mike Rudd, Ross Hannaford, and we formed a band with some of my new music, playing underground dances because Mike had formed Spectrum and was writing his own stuff, and he was playing these underground dances. I said, we can do that.
Yeah.
And I've had a new band. We put that super group together called Sons of the Vegetal Mother.
Which was a great title.
Not vegetable, vegetal. So it's all about the vegetable kingdom. And we're singing songs about food and stuff. Like I was into Zen macrobiotics, so I discovered this while I was away, Brown rice. So singing on the brown rice. It was a fantastic band. And the core of the band was myself and Hannaford and Gary and Wayne, which became Daddy Cool. So we did a few of these underground dances, and Sons of the Vegetal Mother, with the expanded lineup of sometimes 8 or 9 people, with brass and all that, were the first people to play Eagle Rock.
Right.
And so we had Eagle Rock, we'd refined it a bit, and we're playing these places, and that was one of the songs in amongst all the other crazy music we were doing.
Do you have a copy of those original performances?
No, I don't. It was a bit harder to record things then. Yeah. You didn't have you probably did have cassettes and stuff, but it was a little bit trickier, setting up desk tapes and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know why we didn't do it. There are some recordings that we went into the studio and did these 3 tracks for an art exhibition, and the music was part of that.
Yeah.
That was Love is the Law and a couple of other songs. 2 songs I'd written specifically for that exhibition. So there's that record. But some of the other songs I cannot remember how they went, except for the one song that I just sang a bit.
Brown Rice.
Brown Rice. The Brown Rice song is fantastic, and I've got to get that down sometime.
Yeah.
And, but no, we were playing Eagle Rock, and then I said I was interested in doo-wop, and I was researching all this music I hadn't heard very much of that bypassed us out here in Australia, and I was going, let's sing some of this old R&B, we'll do that, and Gary Wayne and Ross, Hannah, come around and we'll have a rehearsal at my place, because I used to rehearse around in my back room.
Yeah,
and it's just the 4 of us, and we started doing some of these songs and learning them really fast because everyone could sing. We had these good grooves, and we got a repertoire together pretty quickly, including Eagle Rock and a few other originals, but mainly kind of doo-wop and that. And we launched that on one of the nights at the TF Much Ballroom, where Sons of Vegetal Mother played, and then later in the evening, the 4-piece new group, Daddy Cool, with completely different, and we dressed differently and everything, came out and played our first show in Melbourne, and I don't know if you remember, but back in those days, progressive rock was this thing where musos had learned to play better, and they were expanding their horizons, and songs would go longer, and there were more solos,
20-minute songs, and and
that was like what Spectrum were doing, with Mike Rudd. So. But we came, and people would sit on the floor and listen to these solos and go, "Oh man, that's awesome," and then and then Daddy Cool came out, And it was like sort of the Beatles or something. We're back to doing simple stuff, 2-3 minute songs, and the place just erupted. Everyone went, "Oh, we're free again," and they all started. I'm not kidding. Everyone rose up and they're all dancing, and so from our very first gig, it was all like, "Oh wow, these guys are great," And so the next all through that summer, from October, November, December, we started. Melbourne was like we were playing everywhere, like schools, unis, clubs, and that. But we all had day jobs. Or Hannah was going to art school, and Gary and I, which is how we met, we were both working at a book warehouse,
Right.
And so we was there, and then we were headlining a few town halls and whatever, and we signed a deal with Sparmac Records, which is a local company. Robbie Porter, one of the things he said, well, I'm living in America all the time now. I knew who he was, and we'll get you to America. And I'm going, that's good, because that's where I want to go. All my musical influences come from America. And by the way, I've just been in England. Everybody in England's trying to get to America. Well, don't bother going back to England.
Isn't it funny?
So that was the game plan, And then we went in the studio, and we released Eagle Rock. We were still working our day jobs, and me and Gary were at the book warehouse and packing books on this line with our buddies at the book warehouse, and Eagle Rock came on the radio, because we play on the radio like you do. And everyone went, yay, and then 2 weeks later we quit our jobs. But yeah, that was a real, it was very difficult to make any kind of money from music. Well, it still is, but back then it was even harder. So everyone still had their day jobs and were toiling away, it was kind of mindless work, because it was great actually, because I'd be working on packing books and that and thinking of songs, and I'd go home and I'd go, You don't want an intellectually challenging job when you're trying to
write
save
songs.
your intellect for writing songs, So that all worked out anyway, and then we were off and running.
So with that song, obviously made a massive hit.
Yeah, massive.
Fast forward to firstly, Elton John was touring Australia. True story.
No, it's true.
Yeah.
Well, we'd gone to America, and we on the way back, and to try and secure a record deal there, which we did.
Yes.
We showcased at the Whiskey A Go-Go. The first night we were terrible. It's the first time we'd ever had stage fright. And then we went back out for a second set. Fortunately, this guy from Warner Reprise had stuck around and went, oh, yeah, these guys are okay. And we had a whole album prepared, so they loved that, Here's an album.
Yes.
So we did get a deal with them. But on the way home, we stopped in New Zealand to play some gigs, because we were breaking out there too. And the promoter of those gigs had come, Robert Raymond, I think it was. He had come back to New Zealand to shepherd us. And he's going, oh, just in Australia, this guy Elton John, who'd only had like one album or something at that time, or 2 albums, I'm not sure. He's got Daddy Cool. He can't shut up about Daddy Cool. He goes on the radio, and all he wants to do is play Daddy Cool. And we'd had the 2 singles, Come Back Again, Eagle Rock and Come Back Again. Both really good tracks. The B-sides were good too. And he's salivating about Daddy Cool. He's going, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard in my life. Now, if you remember, so we didn't actually meet him, but we heard about it. By the time we got back to Australia, he'd left, I think, or was off somewhere. At the time, he was like a grey suit, piano man, orchestras, blah, blah, blah. He goes back to England. Suddenly he's like, zany clothes, writes Eagle Rock, Crocodile Rock, Crocodile Rock. Bernie Tormann's wearing a Daddy Who badge on his photo on the back of Honky Chateau. And we're going, oh, maybe we had something to do with it.
Did he invite you to tour with him?
Later on, he does credit it. He was he was out here not that long ago, and he was saying at shows, this is Melbourne. I love Melbourne. This is how, it's where the guys who inspired me and come from here, and Daddy Cool and blah, blah, blah. So they admitted it. But one time along the way, we were at some kind of function. This is like about 15 years ago or something. And his manager, John Reid, was there, or his manager, who was his manager. I don't think he is anymore. I think he's passed away. And my wife went up to him and said, it's Eagle Rock is like, inspired Crocodile Rock. And he went, if you ever say that again, I'll sue you. I was like, oh, sorry.
Well, thank God for Wikipedia. We can put that in there.
Yeah.
So talking about Melbourne, right? Sunbury Festival, which was huge in Melbourne. Here you are, Daddy Cool, encore, we want an encore. Queen and Skyhooks come out and they get booed off the stage.
Well, I have an issue with that. I mean, you're talking about Wikipedia and you put stuff out there. And
is that true? Is that not true?
Well, I was watching Queen.
Yeah.
I mean, this was not the first Thorpe Sunbury, which was massive.
Yeah.
This is about the third or fourth one.
Yes, 1974.
Yeah, and I hadn't actually played any of the early ones because Daddy Cool were off touring in America and things like that, We always missed it. But we had broken up and I'd formed Mighty Kong, and then that only lasted a year, and then we wanted something to do, and the Sunbury people said, can you reform as a one-off and play Daddy Cool play Sunbury? So I said, oh, okay. Meanwhile, I'd gotten involved with Skyhooks.
Yeah.
Right. They had a different lead singer. His name was Steve Hill. So they came out and they didn't go out over very well, but I was there sort of helping them and come on guys, blah, 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 trying to sell Skyhooks to record companies and all the rest of it. So it didn't go down too well. Steve was very much a kind of lefty guy, and part of the Skyhooks thing was sending up sending up rock and roll. That was part of their thing, send up glam rock and all that.
Yep.
And he, I must say, he was a brilliant performer, and he had helped form that template that they had, about taking the piss out of everything. He co-wrote Love on the Radio with all that stuff at the beginning about, you are on radio, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, they didn't go over that well, and he watched the footage he said, listen, I don't want to be a pop star. This is all getting out of hand. I'm too ugly to be a pop star. You guys want to do this, that's all right. I'm leaving.
Right.
He left. I said to Greg, what are you going to do? He went, I know this other guy. He sang in one of my early bands. And I did a couple of demos. And I went, oh, okay. And so I went along to see them at their first show that I was able to go to with the new singer. It was a suburban pub, one of those big barns. And Skyhooks had a following already, so there was quite a crowd. They come on, Shirley's out front, and I go, hallelujah, because he could sing, he was good looking, he was just as cheeky as Steve Hill. He ran with the template that had been made already. It was just absolutely perfect. And then from that moment on, there was like a bidding war, and we eventually signed with Skyhooks. But okay, now Queen.
Okay.
Same day, I sat down not far from the front because there wasn't a huge crowd, and with a couple of young ladies that we knew who were enamored of Queen.
Yes.
And sitting there wondering what they were going to be like. Okay, they caused a stir with the local roadies, right, who always love to think they're in charge of everything.
Right.
Particularly back then, they were like tough guys and all that, the old school roadies who helped lift. I give them a lot of credit. Helped elevate Australian rock, because they were always there doing the hard yards. But they got upset with Queen because Queen were taking a long time to go on stage because they were waiting for the sun to go down a bit and have more lights, which finally they had to go on, and it was still daytime. So they came on and they played, and I'm going, I think they might have only had like one or two albums at that stage.
Yeah.
They hadn't, was pre-Bohemian Rhapsody, pre-everything really.
Yeah.
And they had the sort of glam thing that Skyhooks were satirising, And so we were going, everyone's trying to make up their minds about them, and I'm going, these guys are pretty good. Okay. Now, if you get booed off stage, as the legend has it,
yes,
you don't come back for an encore.
No.
They got an encore.
Right. Wow.
Right? So they come back, and they said as their encore, they did Jailhouse Rock, right? now everyone can focus on, everyone knows that song.
Yeah.
All their other songs, no one knew them, like, so they're having to decide whether they like them or not.
Mm.
I did this great version of Jailhouse Rock, boom, boom, really cool. And I'm going,
these guys are
they've got chops, they've got rock and roll chops, they know what they're doing. And I think they sang another song as well. But hey, you don't get an encore if you blew it off stage. I rest my case.
There you go. There you go.
But the roadies, I think, probably spread that thing, It was like, we're upset with him and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Blew it off stage. If there's anyone out there that can correct me that was there when they heard the booing that got them an encore.
There you go. Let us know.
Yeah. And the girls, the girls, let's call them, groupies, very nice ladies. And they're going, there was a bit of like angst, amongst certain people in the crowd. And they go, "Oh, be quiet," well, these people are lovely guys. And, so they were standing up for them. But I think that they made their case. And as the other part of that legend goes, they said, we'll be back and we'll be number one.
Yeah.
To the naysayers. And they were.
They were.
They did come back and they were number one.
Yeah, weren't they? Weren't they? Now, speaking of number one, the number one band in 74, 75, it's been 50 years now. You produced
time flies.
Living in the 70s. What an iconic album. And like you said, obviously Cheryl had more front than Myers. He was just like out there.
Well, they did. They all did. They were
all
like the Beatles, and everyone could speak articulately and funnily and shoot down anyone who was like, trying to shoot them
including
down.
Mike Willisey. I don't know whether you remember that.
Yeah.
That interview completely shot him down.
Yeah.
So, doing this album, it was such the songs were so. You kind of knew when you were doing the album that the songs were going to be so radically different that they were going to get, flack from everyone.
I had done a huge amount of what I would call pre-production, where you're not going into the studio cold.
No.
Like I said, I'd heard those songs when they were in they had different members in the band, they had different singers, they had two different guitarists when I first heard Skyhooks. But the songs, I went, who wrote those songs? And they said, "Oh, Greg over here." So I got him around to my place, and I'd already decided I was going to set up my own music publishing company because I was unhappy with the way music publishing companies kind of had a cartel, and everything was like 50-50. They'd get 50%, you get 50% for doing supposedly the work, Mm-hmm. And so I said to Greg, I want to get these songs out there, Mm-hmm. And I'll give you, which was unheard of in those days, I'll give you 70-30. I think 50-50 is wrong,
Yeah.
But I'll be, so for that moment on, I was like, and I gave him a small advance and he went off and bought a new bass amp.
Yeah.
And then they started to morph into they got Freddie, they got Red on guitar, they got Bongo on guitar. And then eventually, as we just discussed, they got Cheryl out front and it all came together. But even before Cheryl came along, I was taking them into the studio and we were doing demo versions of a lot of those songs that they had in their repertoire that ended up on the first album. And so, they had a lot of songs. We couldn't fit them all on the first album. Some of them ended up on the second album.
Yeah.
Right? So they had all these songs and we were working them. And when you play a song on stage, sometimes you go on a bit and all that. So when we go into the studio to do the demos, it was like, well, we've got to make that fit better. We cut that bit out, And so we were doing all this work. So by the time that they got into the studio, to sign the record deal with Mushroom, I'd gone, listen, I really want to produce this. And Mike Godinsky was a fan of Daddy Cool and everything. He was like, yeah, okay, I'll let you do that. And because I knew the songs backward, I was totally on side with the band, and I had all these ideas about what other things we could do to just kind of make it interesting, and marimbas and bongos and early synthesizer noises and all of that kind of stuff. And the harmonies, I would get out there and sing harmonies with them, or get in an extra guy that I knew, and they'd all, Freddie would do his bass voice and that whole thing.
Yes.
I had all that, these extra little bits and pieces that I thought would enhance the production. So that's how that ended up sounding like it did. And bless them, they kind of all went along with what I had to say, and would listen to me quite carefully. And it didn't take long because of that other work that we'd done. I think we did the whole album in like a couple of weeks or something. There was a little breaks because they had to go off and play. And then we started mixing it, and they were going, we've got to have a single, So we mixed off the title track, Living in the 70s became their first single. Made some waves in Melbourne. It got up to number 11 or something.
Yeah.
Then by the time the album was finished and ready to go, they had the next single ready. We had the next one ready, and it was Horror Movie. And that just went through the roof, everywhere. And because it was a beautiful thing that happened, coinciding with all of that timing, they were the first guys on
Countdown
came on. It was in colour. They were the perfect band for that. They were doing Horror Movie.
Didn't they start in black and white and then it turned to colour? Yeah.
So they were the perfect Countdown band. Everything just fell into place, The same thing happened with Daddy Cool. Things fell into place.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about success, folks. A lot of it's talent. It helps if you're good. But there's so much luck involved.
There is.
Being in the right place at the right time, having the right people help you, and just being there in the zone when it's your turn, and seizing the opportunity. So, if you're struggling out there, guys, don't give up. But if you see an opportunity, grab it.
I like that. Now, fast forwarding a bit, I mean, kind of around the same time, Jojo Zepp, I believe that you were responsible for kicking off Jojo Zepp and the Falcons.
Well, Joe Camilleri was a contemporary of mine, and we had been playing neighbourhood dances when I was in the Pink Finks, right, 1965. And he was in a band called the King Bees. Basically, they just played early Rolling Stone songs, and Jojo Zepp would come out and be Mick Jagger, and he sounded like him and everything. And the lead guitarist was Peter Starkey, who was Bongo's big brother.
Right.
So, and had been the first Skyhooks guitarist, by the way, when I first saw them. So I knew Peter Starkey, and so they're all floating around doing different things. Joe, King Bees, and I don't know what he was doing, he was working jobs and whatever, but then he turned up in the Palacco Brothers with another songwriter that I was kind of nurturing, very eccentric guy, but I liked him because he had humour and all of that. And once again, he was satirising things. Peter Lilly.
Right, yes.
Peter Lilly and Johnny Topper in the Palacco Brothers, which had a kind of floating population, very funny.
Yeah. And
Joe was starting to play saxophone in the Palacco Brothers, and I'm going, hey, Joe, you're sounding pretty good these days on the sax, Why don't we go in? Because I had this thing where I was taking people in the studio. Studios didn't cost that much. And it's getting near Christmas time, let's do Chuck Berry song, Run, Run, Rudolph, right? And I wrote a B-side called Guess Who, which is a sort of filthy Santa Claus song, blues, couple entendres and stuff. And so we did that. We cut this single, and it came out, and because I was involved with Skyhooks, Kaninsky said, yeah, we'll put it out, no worries, we'll pay for it, put it out. So it came out on Mushroom. And they're saying, well, there's a show at my music bowl. We want you to promote the single, Joe. I can't remember who else was on the bill. And he goes, okay, well, I better get a band. I said, well, Pat's band's pretty good. Pat Wilson, the Bop Girl, she before she was a Bop Girl, she had a bunch of bands. She was singing away and having a good time. She had a band called The Marvels.
Right.
And there was Jeff Burston, and there was various other people who became... and they appeared as, I said, what are you going to call the band? What are you going to call the band on the record, Joe? And he said, Jojo Zepp, because that was a bit like Jojo Gun, which was a Chuck Berry song.
Yep.
a bit like ZZ Top, it's like
Yep.
B.B. King. So Joe Joseph. I said, what's that mean? He says, well, in Maltese, which I am, he was Maltese Australian, Giuseppe is Joseph,
Yeah.
Giuseppe. So Joe, Giuseppe,
Yep.
and the Maltese, the Maltese Falcons.
Yeah.
Giuseppe and the Falcons. So there's a Maltese connection there. So that's really cool, man. So that's what it came out on the record.
Yeah.
Giuseppe and the Falcons. So I had a record company called Oz Records that I just set up with Glenn Wheatley, and we were doing a soundtrack for a movie called Oz.
Yep.
And I said, let's do some more tracks. But he'd done this deal with Mushroom. Well, Michael Gudinski was overseas, and I went in to see Ray Evans, who was the other guy running the company. I said, listen, this thing at Judges, he did the one single that didn't really do any good. I want to do an album with him. Can you just release this from the contract? And he goes, yeah, okay, that sounds all right. We don't have to pay for an album. So we start recording it. I signed him to Oz Records, and Gudinski came back and he was furious that Ray Evans had done this without his okays. And so we ended up doing 2 albums on Oz Records, and then Gudinski got his revenge in the end, and I did all the groundwork. Like I said, getting him in the studio, we did 2 albums. Wayne Burt was the main songwriter, but Joe by that time had kind of got the vibe that maybe writing songs was a good idea, and he started writing songs. And then they'd left Oz Records and they were signing with Mushroom, so Gudinski got his revenge and got them back, and he also got the new Joe Camilleri, who was now writing songs. And the very first song he wrote, he said, Ross, come around and listen to this. And I'm going, well, you're not on my label anymore, but okay,
Yeah.
And he wrote, he had So Young. And he'd writing that with the guys from his band, Jeff Burston and Tony Fazy, the guitarist.
Yeah.
And I made a few suggestions that he took on board. And then that was, I think, probably their first single on Mushroom. Yeah. Got covered by Elvis Costello.
Wow.
So there's all my mentoring.
Yeah, there you go.
Out into the world. And Joe was off and running, and next thing he had Screaming Targets and a massive... and by the way, the reggae influence, I had a bit to do with that as well.
Yes. And, of course, by that time, you're just like, that's it. I'm out of here. I'm going to do my own thing now. And you started Mondo Rock, which, I've got to say, from my perspective, growing up, in the early 80s, it was a massive influence.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people that went through that as well.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I was growing up, so my songs were getting a bit more sophisticated and contemporary. With Daddy Cool, yes, we wrote songs, but a lot of it was retro, kind of looking back over our shoulder, appreciating early rock and roll and early rhythm and blues. And by the way, the Beatles and the Stones did the same thing in their early albums.
Yeah, they did.
And so that's what you do. You're young and you're going, I love that stuff when I was growing up. Let's play some of that. And then you start writing your own songs, and then that takes off. So by the time I'd gotten, I did 3 albums with Skyhooks, and then I was going, I got to get back out doing my own stuff. So I mentioned that soundtrack to the Oz movie, and I already had a song that I'd written called "Living in the Land of Oz," and that became the theme for the movie.
Great song, by the way.
Yeah. And they're going, well, you want to go out and promote this record, Ross? Because it was on Oz label. I said, okay. I said, we'll do a show. There's the Astor Theatre, which is still there in Windsor, in Victoria, close to town, near Paran. And they were having rock gigs at the time there, concerts, and they were putting something on there. And what are you going to call the band? Because I was going out to promote Living in the Land of Oz, my first solo single. I said, we'll call it Ross Wilson's Mondo Rock. Oh, okay. So that's how Mondo Rock came into being. And Mondo, I was thinking along the lines of, there was a bunch of movies at the time, and Mondo Carney, from the 60s, they're all kind of sort of faux documentaries, supposedly showing this sleazy side of life, and it took off in a big way. Mondo Cane was a huge hit, Italian movie, but it had the theme, da, 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 which was a big hit too. And so the Mondo became a thing, and there was this Mondo Hollywood, showing the underbelly of Hollywood. Mondo Mod, about mods and rockers. There was this whole thing that stick on these sort of fake documentaries. And so I was thinking along the lines of Mondo Rock, B-side, sleazy underbelly of rock. But the word actually means world, and I hadn't sort of twigged to that. It's Italian for world, and French, le monde, It's mondo, el globo. It's the same kind of thing. So it was actually quite pertinent when I found out what it meant. It was like rock world or world of rock.
Which opens up a lot
of... Well, it's this other B-grade thing that was attached to it.
Opens up a lot of understanding too, because throughout the albums, you throw in songs or you throw in titles like Mondo Sexto or
Mondo
Nuvo
Sexto.
Mondo Sexto.
That was a good example of using that influence of these funny movies because I'd seen a Japanese film that, I used to, because you're young, you go along and see movies, you're trying to see some breasts and all that sort of stuff. And there was like this one about Tokyo by night, right?
Right.
And it had subtitles over here, and they had girls without tops on and all that sort of stuff. And I'm going, this is awesome. But it's a terrible movie, terrible. But they had this really funny song where the girls came out and they're going, sexy nudo, right? So that became the inspiration for Mondo Sexo, sexy nudo. It's one of the few films I've ever walked out of. It was so bad, but it had a lasting impression with this sexy nudo thing.
Oh, that's funny.
And once again, that song's very satirical and covers a lot of issues, actually.
It does. I mean, you weren't really that underground with the songs. I mean, they were pure pop songs. Chemistry, State of the Heart. My personal favourite, Summer of '81.
Yeah, well, they were all the ones you mentioned. They're Eric McCusker songs, because I'd done one album with a lineup of early Mondo Rock, which took a while for the band to kind of get going. There was a lot of lineup changes. But eventually we put out an album called Primal Park.
Yeah.
And there were issues with band members and stuff, and so I disbanded them and started again. Different management, different record label, different everything, different band, but still kept the name because we'd already established that as being connected with me.
Yeah.
The reason I'd got Eric on board because I was auditioning guitarists, and Wilbur Wilde had given me he was sharing a house with Eric, and Wilbur was playing with Joe Giuseppe, so we're all hanging around together.
Yeah.
Gave me this cassette. He said, this guy writes good songs, and he also plays the guitar. So I went, listen to the songs. I'm going, oh, wow, there's some good stuff here. So he came in and he auditioned 3 times,
Wow.
until we were convinced, because he had been playing with Captain Matchbox Woosby Band on sort of jug music and not real kind of loud or anything. And we're going, you might have to get a bigger amp, man, a rock band, So we did all that. And he had so many songs, and I was happy to have an extra hand on board, because if you're trying to make an album a year, I write good songs, but I'm not that productive as he was. So we had this new pool, of course, we brought out our first single was State of the Heart.
Yeah.
And then I went, gee, maybe I should write a song. So I came up with the second one, which was Cool World. So I was still writing some pretty good stuff, but he was writing this super terrific, glossy, new, musically tuned in songs. They're all really good.
They were great.
And I became the interpreter vocally of those songs. I listened to him, what he had to say, and then I'd put my own spin on it, like with State of the Heart.
Yes.
We're going to have a bass thing in the middle, and I'm going, well, I'll put in a few daddy go, yo, to give it some atmosphere, and that became there's not many songs that have a bass solo in the middle.
No.
In fact, in America, when it got released there, they cut that bit out because they thought the song was too long. I'm thinking, they cut the best bit out. What did they do? They're fucking Americans. Fuck them.
I think Rick Springfield did a version of it, didn't he?
Well, yeah, you remember, he's Australian.
Yeah.
And he was like, he'd keep it. And at one stage, he was on the same label as Daddy Cool, Sparmac, or became Wizard.
With Zoot? On the solo.
Yeah, produced by Robbie Porter, the producer of Daddy Cool. So, and he was tuned in to like what was going on back home by the time he was in America having stuff. I did Living in the Land of Oz. He brings out an album called Living in Oz. Right?
Yes.
Then, down the track, he's like, they had a big hit with State of the Heart. A couple of years later, he calls up Eric McCusker and goes, I've covered your song, man. And he goes, that's good. He goes, yeah, but I wrote this extra bit. And he'd written a bridge and stuck it in, right? And I guess instead of the bass solo or whatever. And Eric goes, well, I don't think it actually needed a bridge, Rick. But Rick's going, well, I want a piece of the song.
Right.
Going, well, that's pretty cheeky, Rick. You should have asked first. But they ended up making a deal on that version of the song, but not on any. I didn't get a piece of any of the other versions because it got covered a few times,
Yes.
He was huge in Germany, and it became a big hit in Germany and a lesser hit in the States, but did really well. Eric was thrilled because it's great to get you. So, in fact, we nearly didn't get to do that song with Mondo Rock because Eric had a publishing deal with Warner Chappell. He had, like I said, so many songs, and we were like doing a bunch of them, trying them out for our first album and everything. But we hadn't even recorded anything yet. And he said, I knew he'd gone in and recorded some demos for his recording company. I said, hey, man, give us a listen. He said, those songs I did for them because I don't think they were right for Mondo Rock. I said, listen, give me a listen, will you? And on it was State of the Heart. And I said, man, that song's really good. We've got to do that. He goes, but it's not rock. You'll call Mondo Rock. I said, doesn't matter. That's a really good song.
You got to have a slow one.
And that became our first single. Yeah. And even the record company was going, this is a ballad, you Mondo Rock. I thought we'd get a rock band,
Yeah, don't release that as a first single.
They put it out as a first single, gold record.
Yeah.
And then that's how we got to do an album because it was a very sort of tenuous deal that we had. And it was like, do a single, we'll see what happens. Do another single that went Cool World, that went really well as well. That was number 2. I think they both reached number 2.
I think like there's always a moment though in every band where you reach a song, and you did it early with Daddy Cool, with Eagle Rock.
Yeah.
With Mondo Rock, suddenly Come Said the Boy just became it's really the song.
We'd already had a bunch of hits. We'd had off the first album, Chemistry album was the album of the year, Go Set album of the year.
Great album.
Had 4 singles off that,
Yeah, sensational.
Comes State of the Heart, Cool World, both huge. Summer of 81 and Chemistry that were keeping the album going, but still hit the charts. Then we had No Over Mondo, different producer, a bit more kind of rock kind of. It was the guy that Peter McGeehan who produced Man at Work, and we said, gee, we'd like you to do a thing with us. And he was hanging around Australia, so we did that. But it wasn't as big. We had a couple of singles off that. I thought it was a really good album, actually.
Great album, yes.
But the biggest single of that was No Time.
Yeah.
And then we were kind of going, what are we going to do, and we sort of needed to get back up there a bit. And that's where Come Said the Boy came along, and we were trying to get a new album together. We spent a lot of time doing demos. But we knew that Come Said the Boy had a lot going for it.
Yeah.
And on that album, I think we would have spent, the album had like 10 tracks or something, and we would have spent about half the time just on that one song.
Yeah.
Just getting it fine-tuned, and Eric had different stabs at the guitar solo in the middle, and I'm kind of going, I think he can do better. He finally came up with this really interesting guitar solo that people today still go, that is a really good solo. You know, I go, guys, I have different people playing with me, and I go, you don't have to stick exactly to their solo. And they go, I know we want to.
Don't mess the formula.
Homage to his work on that, you know. And I mean, in fact, Keith Urban was out here like 6 months ago or whatever, and he actually got in contact with Eric and told him how much he'd been listening to him. And Eric, Keith Urban is a shit hot guitarist.
Yes.
He called Eric to say how he'd been listening to Come Said the Boy over time, and just going, that's a real piece of work there, man. And he just wanted to let you know I know how good it is, you know. And I was like, thank you, Keith.
Yeah, that is phenomenal. I mean, I could talk with you all day, and I know you've got other things to do. But what an incredible career that you have had, even up to that point. And we haven't even touched on, the solo work that you did. You know, I mean,
I did slow down for a while in between marriages.
Yes,
I had about an 8-year period where I was hardly performing at all. I was spending the time as a sort of bachelor. I didn't, my son had grown up, and I didn't have a partner for quite a long time, and I was spending my time productively writing songs with and for other people.
Yes.
For instance, and I got the bug for that because Farnham in '86 had recorded "Touch Your Paradise," which was a Mondo Rock song.
Yeah.
And put it on Whispering Jack, and boom,
massive song.
And I went, wow, this is great, because I hadn't had many of my songs covered by that stage. And then he did "We're No Angels," which is also a Mondo Rock song, because he'd said, have you got any more songs like "Touch Your Paradise"? I said, well, there's this other one that, gave him an explanation about what it was all about. And lo and behold, he did another great, his interpretation of that on Age of Reason album. And I was, loving what Farnham was doing. I think Age of Reason is one of the greatest singles ever put out in Australia. I just absolutely love it, And then we got together and we wrote together. And we did seem like a good idea at the time with him and his producer, Ross Fraser.
Yes.
So he was being real nice to me, and covering my music, and other people were taking notice. And so then I got an invitation to write with Jimmy Barnes. Late 80s, early 90s. And so I'm doing stuff with Jimmy Barnes, and we did Flesh and Wood.
Okay, yep.
That had a few. That had maybe 1, 2. There was 3 songs that I submitted that he did. One was Let It Go. I'd written that with Rick Brewster from the Angels.
Yep.
He did and Jimmy did a duet with Deborah Conway on that.
Oh, yeah, yep.
Hell of a Time.
Yeah,
which is a song I wrote with my buddy, now passed away, Eris O'Brien, who I've written his songs with. Hell of a Time, we'd just written that off, and I submitted it to Jimmy, and he and I did a duet on that, and I later recorded a more upbeat full band version on my I Come in Peace album.
Yes.
And then in the next couple of albums, he did like Heat.
Yep.
Had Sister Mercy, I think, was on that.
Yep.
I think that might have been the first song we wrote together.
Yeah.
And then there's a few other ones as well that popped up on about 3 albums in a row. So we had we're on a bit of a roll there. And I was writing with him and with his guitarist at the time, Jeff Neal, Canadian guy who was a fantastic guitarist. He's now back in Canada, but he was his right-hand man for a while, and we wrote a bunch of songs. Oh, yeah, on Flesh and Wood, the other one, which was a co-write with Jeff and Barnesy, was You Can't Make Love Without a Soul. Which is a terrific little song, I love it. Sometimes I play it live too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so many hits that you've had. Where do you think, just from a production and from a musical perspective, where do you think we're heading with the music industry now? With all the up and coming bands, are we in a healthy place right now?
I think the biggest problem at the moment is that live work is drying up. In the pandemic, APRA get all the returns from live venues, for APRA, Australian Performing Rights Association, and
Yep.
if you play a show, you can submit your set list and all the writers, and they collect performance money from venues. They have to have APRA licenses, etc. So that's an income stream. APRA had the figures. They said 1,300 live gigs disappeared and have not come back in Australia. Oh, that's Australia-wide.
That's phenomenal.
Right, but the main places being New South Wales, biggest, most populated state, Victoria, which is like very healthy music scene. And you need those places to nurture new talent.
Yeah.
And the best way to get good and to be heard, aside from mass media, is playing live.
Yeah.
In my opinion, if you're a working band, one live gig is worth about 10 rehearsals. You can go in rehearsing at home and doing all your stuff and get your songs together. Playing live, you're getting all the feedback from people, you're hearing yourself, you get good, you get better. You know, that's how Skyhooks, that's how Daddy Cool came up. That's how Skyhooks came up. That's how, and now I've got my own daughter has put out this album, and they're phenomenal live. This is Gut Health, everybody. This album came out last week.
Wow.
It's actually on the ARIA vinyl chart. Right. Right next to all the other guys.
Yep.
Internationals. And it's also on the ARIA Australian Artists Top 20. Now, I hope it stays there. Now, they're hot at the moment, really hot. Yeah. They're finding it difficult to find a huge amount. You know, you need that momentum to keep going with live gigs and all of it. So they did a sold-out launch the other night, and they're going to Sydney this weekend and the next day Brisbane to do the album launch.
Yeah.
But then over the summertime, they should be playing like festivals and all that, and there's not a lot of that going on. They do have stuff happening, but this is a problem, a real problem, you know. Unless you are an act that just is electro stuff and you make it in your bedroom and you put it out, you know, with machines playing everything, which that has a certain thing that's good, you know, it depends. There's a lot of rubbish, but there's a lot of good stuff too. But you still need to play live, you know. It's like there's only Glastonbury's only once a year or whatever it is, you know.
And it's hard to get airplay too. For
airplay is band. Difficult. They got a lot of support for this album last week. It was album of the week on Triple R, PBS, 2SER in Sydney, and Triple Z. These are all the community stations that people listen to for new stuff, that support new stuff. But those radio stations, they don't have like they're all different, you know, every 2 hours you've got a different show. So you might get airplay on this one and then there's a different specialist show. Well, you won't get airplay on that. So even though you're the album of the week, you might only get like 2 songs played or something, you know, in a day, you know. So like it's difficult. So but they've got all of that momentum and they're getting played overseas. They got a 4 out of 5 review in NME.
Wow.
You know, and yet the gigs aren't there.
Yeah. It's tough.
That is a huge problem. And people, you have got to go to live gigs.
And look, you know, your gigs are selling out. You know,
I'm
you've
lucky.
got sold out
I've got
gigs.
a history.
You have, yeah.
I've got various constituencies. Now you notice that we're doing more theatre shows than we used to. One of the reasons is, God bless them, Daddy Cool fans are getting a bit older and they want to sit down. A lot of them do. Not all of them, but a lot of them do. And we go, it's not all old people. There are a lot of other.
There's a few. Along. Yeah.
And then there's the other people, like Mondo Rock fans, are going, we don't want to sit down. We want to get up and groove around, you know.
Yeah.
So we're doing it all. We play pubs, we play clubs. Unfortunately, New South Wales still has a very intact club structure.
Yes.
Where they have to provide entertainment as part of the constitution of the club. They've got great facilities with dressing rooms and all that stuff. God bless you, New South Wales.
Yes.
In Victoria, it's a little bit different, and there's various things that are squeezing the live music. One is, will people get back into the habit after the pandemic? A lot of them haven't, you know. The other thing is insurance. Who would have thought? Places are cutting closing because they can't afford the insurance policies. Because of, pandemics and natural disasters and all that bleed into the costs of insurance, as people who insure their houses and cars would have noticed. The premiums going up. Well, at gigs, which I don't think is a high-risk place personally, they're making these premiums so high that it pushes up drink prices, it pushes up entrance prices. It's like people going, I can't afford to go out. This is a really big problem.
Yeah, it's
whereas you used to go out and it didn't cost much to get in. Drinks were cheap. They didn't have as stringent health and safety rules. You play a pub and that cram in as many people as possible. You're not allowed to do that anymore.
I think the proof, though, is really with bands like Chisel, for example. They go, right, we're going to go out, we're going to do it in a tent. It's, the ticket prices are going to be, reasonable. They sell out.
Yeah.
Everywhere, We've
got reasonable prices. I think our prices are reasonable. And we don't do that thing that they were exposing on Four Corners a week ago about, fluid prices.
Dynamic pricing,
like Uber tickets.
I think that's ridiculous. That is ridiculous.
Criminal.
It is. And who gets the money for that?
We said a ticket price that might cost you like $50-$60 to come and see me in a nice place, by the way.
Yeah.
But that doesn't change.
No.
We put the tickets on sale 3 or 4 months out. They tick over. We eventually sell out. And that's the same for everybody. It doesn't matter who you are or what you are. We're not doing and because of that, I'm playing regularly. Like I'm going away this weekend. I'm playing. This is a good one. Played it before. The Nimbin.
Oh, nice.
Blues, rock, folk festival. Fantastic. And then we're going off to the coast in Queensland and playing a couple of things over there.
Yeah,
so
nice.
I'm doing 3 gigs this weekend,
What more could you ask for?
Typically, I'll do 2 to 3 gigs a week.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky.
Yes.
But this is it. I have a band that's very, very good. I've got a management. I've got an agent. I've got crew. So anytime on the road, I've got 4 other musicians, plus myself, it's 5 people, 2 crew, a stage guy and a sound guy. When I go interstate, I'm hiring cars. I have to fly there. I hire backline to play through when we're there. Accommodation. People, it's expensive to come and play for you.
Yeah.
But I'm still got my head above water. And I feel good about not only bringing joy to the masses and myself.
Yeah.
Have a great time. But I'm supporting other musicians and their families.
Yeah.
And you've got to keep all of that in mind when you go, why can't I see this act here, or why is this ticket price so high? You're going off to see Chisel, which sold out in 5 seconds. It's like $200 a ticket, but it's Chisel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good on them. I love it. And they're killing it. They're giving great shows and all that.
Yeah.
But the infrastructure costs and all of it and all that is stuff I talked
massive.
About it costs a lot, and sometimes to go back, I've made a little bit, but not a lot, but we can keep going. Yeah. Enough to keep going and keep doing what we love doing, and hopefully to being a bit of a role model to, my things like Gut Health, my daughter's band, which, by the way, Gut Health, they don't sound like anybody else. If you want to hear some new music, get on Spotify and listen to Gut Health, and then they've got vinyl, they've got cassettes. The cassette sounds is awesome. I was playing on my machine yesterday. It sounds great. Yeah. Only $15 for a cassette, folks.
That's incredible. I would never, if you had said to me, cassettes are going to come back, I would have just gone, no,
it's a thing.
You're joking.
Yeah, it's a thing.
It is.
But the bright light for Gut Health, they did 2 tours of Europe this year.
Yeah,
in May and July. They love them over there. So get a taste of Gut Health before they seduce to go live over in France or somewhere.
Yeah. Well, look, it's been an absolute honour and a pleasure chatting with you. Really, I think it was about probably a year and a half ago, I caught up with you in Launceston, and I said then I've got to get you on and do a show, and here we are. You know, we've still just touched the tip of the iceberg with your career.
Yeah, well, you got to be talking there. I don't usually talk that much. Okay. Sorry, folks, if I'm boring you. But,
no. I think that the one thing, if I can say, if you want to learn how to do music, if you want to learn how to do it properly, this guy here is the real deal. He's the one that was there at the start of the 70s. He's still going strong now. He's got a new song. Well, that's kind of a new song.
Put out an EP last year.
Put out an EP. I mean, you're still putting music out, which I love.
Yeah, I've got enough songs for a really good album. It's just a matter of getting in there and doing them, because I just want it to sound really good, you know. So, like, that's the thing, finding the time to get in there and getting the right sound and all of that is very important. I don't want my later day work to sound, you know, half-assed. Yes. I want it to sound really good. So we're putting a bit of preparation into, like I mentioned with Skyhooks, there was a lot of pre-production.
Yeah. You
know, playing songs live, doing demos, all of that, fine-tuning it before the public actually gets to hear it.
Yeah. There you go. And the words from Ross, do it live. That's it. Just
live
do
is
it
good.
Live. Yeah.
You're in the moment, you know.
You are.
And you learn a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I'm going to put all of the links up on the description for the tours, and if you are in a place where you can get to see Ross, then definitely do that. Sit down, watch him, or stand up and dance if you want. Whatever you want to do, it's fantastic.
And Gut Health.
Go and see Gut Health if they're coming to a place.
Athina Wilson, Athina Uh is the stage name.
Athina
on lead vocals and does all the lyrics.
Yeah. Fantastic. I'm going to put the link up to them as well, so you can check them out.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Ross, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you, and looking forward to seeing you when you get back to Launceston next year.
Yeah. Well, early. Where is it? I'll tell you what today is.
Is it June that
No. We're there in January.
In January.
January.
Shearwater. Yep, Shearwater Resort, Scamander Resort.
Scaramanda, and then further away,
Dodgers Ferry. Yeah.
So it's summertime. Everyone's down the beach, and we'll be there having a beach party bingo with you in Tassie.
Fantastic. Might even head down to Scamander myself. Love the place.
Yeah, I'd love to see you there.
It's great. Ross, thanks for joining me on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hit plus or follow to subscribe to the podcast, and head over to Facebook at The Long Way to the Top Podcast and give us a like. Keep on rocking, and I'll catch you on the next episode of Long Way to the Top.